Hello, everyone. It's your boy Jeff here. And once again, we are delving into the realm of Stephen King. So, disclaimer, this will not be about records or music, but this will be about the Stephen King tag that my friend Beth over at Red Rum Records recently posted, because she and I are fellow super fans of Stephen King, and she put out a 10-question tag to use as an idea to make a video to talk about Stephen King. So, since that's a subgenre of this channel, I heartily support it, and I'm throwing my hat in the ring with my answers to the questions. So, like I said, there's 10, and I pretty much knew the answers to most of them right off the bat. But we'll go along and we'll see what we come up with here. First question is pretty easy. Do you like Stephen King? Are you a fan of his work? I don't know if you can see back here. See all these books? I've got 2 bookshelves worth of his hardcovers. Sorry if that was a little disorienting. Yeah, I've read all of Stephen King's books. Every published novel, I think just about every published short story, unless some things have come out since his last short story collection, which there may be a few things out there that are new that I haven't got to yet. And I think the only other thing of his that I haven't read that I've been meaning to get around to is his famous unfinished story or novel called The Plant, which he famously included sections of it, I think, in a Christmas card, like back in the 80s or something like that, for his close friends. He did something like that. I think most of it's available online. I just haven't sat down to read it. But other than that, all 61 or 62 books of his that he's put out, I've read. So yeah, I guess you could say I'm a fan. Question number 2. How and when did you discover King? What age and your first book or movie? I discovered Stephen King at age 9. I think I mentioned this before, way back when I did my first Stephen King intro video. But that was a couple years ago. So we're going to renew the answer. And at 9 years old, this was on television for the first time in 1979. The 2-part TV movie adaptation of Salem's Lot. And I just got this for Christmas this past year, the DVD, and I just rewatched it. And it's held up, in some spots, in other spots it hasn't, but hey, for a 42-year-old movie, not too bad. But anyway, watched this when I was 9, scared the crap out of me. So then, of course, I had to get the book, and I've always meant to show this. I don't think I ever have before. This is the original paperback that I bought in 1979 once I saw the TV version of it. It's in pretty delicate shape. It's been read through I don't know how many times. I had to tape. The cover was starting to come off, so I had to do a little tape surgery with it. But yeah, this is for sentimental sake. I'll always keep this copy around. But, and I know I've shown this before, I did end up getting an actual first edition hardcover of Salem's Lot, also with the cover, the dust jacket in delicate shape, so I put it in a plastic book cover. So age 9, Salem's Lot, that's what got me started in the King universe. And yeah, that might answer a few questions about me. I don't know. Question number 3. Your overall favorite book or story? Still, number 1. And I know I've mentioned this before. There are a few others that come close, like It or The Stand, or, I could probably think of a couple others off the top of my head, but really, I know before I die I'm going to end up reading this book at least 1 or 2 more times. I reread this at the beginning of my Stephen King reading project. It's kind of what sparked the idea for me to go back and reread through a lot of his books, which is something that I'm still doing. And just as a quick update on that, I'm in the middle of reading The Mist, which is in the Skeleton Crew story collection. So yeah, that's my current King reading right now. But yeah, overall, this is my favorite. It's not too long. It's only like 400 and some pages, just over 400 pages, which is pretty short for a King novel. It builds the tension. He develops it feels like he develops the entire town of Salem's Lot, and you meet every person in it. I know people complain about that, thinking that it drags the book down, makes it too slow. But there's a payoff for that. And at the end, the reason I love this book, one of the reasons, you get to know these people, you see them in their daily life, and as the book progresses, some strange things start happening around the town. And then before you know it, you start not seeing these people. And then, a little past the halfway point in this book, the lead characters, Ben and Mark and Susan, look around and half the town is like gone because they've been turned. So you get the weight of that feeling of like aloneness and being up against something so malevolent you don't really know how to handle it. So it's that collective feeling of like isolation that King really drives home, but it takes a lot of setup. He's done a lot worse, believe me, with a lot more pages. He's been a lot more talky in his books. He cuts to the point fairly quickly in this one. So yeah, this one still stands alone among his books for me as my favorite, without a doubt. Question number 4, your favorite film adaptation. Let me find it. I don't have a physical copy of the movie itself, but it comes from this book, Different Seasons, and that would be The Shawshank Redemption, which is the first novella in this collection, 4-novella collection. And in the book, it's called Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. And it's funny. It's only, I think it's like the shortest one in this book. It's only just over 100 pages. But man, I could watch Shawshank. I've seen the movie countless times, but it's one of those movies like, Groundhog Day or The Blues Brothers or, a couple others where I can just, if I catch it on TV and I see it, I can just start watching it no matter where it's at in the movie. It doesn't have to start from the very beginning. I can just pick right up and get right into it. So that's one of my favorite movies, period. But in the realm of King movies, Shawshank Redemption is my favorite, for sure. Which is really odd because, Stephen King is, the master of horror. And my favorite movie of his is a prison drama. It's a great movie, and I'll fight anyone who tries to say otherwise. But, for my money, Shawshank is always going to be one of my favorites. Your least favorite film adaptation. And as a bonus question, do you like Maximum Overdrive? I'll answer the bonus first. I haven't seen Maximum Overdrive in probably 30 some years, but I remember liking it when I watched it. I know it's the one movie that King directed himself. I know he was coked out of his mind when he did it. I think that was like right before he went sober and gave up all that stuff. But the movie is, as I remember it, was pretty crazy. I remember the Green Goblin truck. And I remember, it's based on a short story of his called Trucks, which is in the Night Shift collection. And I remember a few of the actors in the movie, but I probably really need to rewatch it. But going off of my hazy old memory, I like Maximum Overdrive pretty well. But as far as my least favorite film adaptation, just because I don't think one film could encompass it all, I think it would be better suited as a series, whether a mini series or, a weekly TV series, or something that gets put out on Netflix or whatever, would be The Dark Tower. One movie just couldn't cut it. That movie didn't stand a chance. And sure enough, the movie is really not good. Nothing against the actors. I thought Idris Elba played a good Roland, but there just is too much in The Dark Tower to put in even if you made a 3-hour movie, I don't think you could do it. Or even a 2-part movie like the It remake. There's just, so much material here. You've got over 2,000 pages of story to try to condense down. Yeah, but I'm glad they tried it, but The Dark Tower is just not good. And there are many King movies that aren't good, but that one kind of stands alone for me. Question number 6: a book or story that should be adapted that hasn't yet. I'm gonna go. Well, I've got 2. I'm gonna go with something from the Bachman books, which I know Beth showed, but I'm gonna go for The Long Walk, which is something that I've recently reread. And I think this was in some kind of deal to get made. I think Frank Darabont was tapped to adapt The Long Walk, and he's the one that did Shawshank and The Green Mile, which is also another great movie. But I don't think it's in limbo somewhere. But I would love to see somebody, whether it's Frank Darabont or somebody else, adapt The Long Walk, just because that story is so it's so relentless and evil and heartless. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. I think a filmmaker could really do a lot with the story. So that would be my vote. The other thing that I think would be interesting to get made that I don't think has been adapted yet is Eyes of the Dragon. This is up for a reread for me pretty soon. It's a short novel. It's almost kind of like a kid's novel in a way, fantasy, but you don't often get like a straight fantasy novel out of King, and I would love to see this get adapted into a movie. Like I said, this one is going to be up for a reread soon, so I'll refresh my memory on it, but I remember enjoying this book quite a lot. And I think this is only one of the few books of his that hasn't been adapted yet, because I sat there looking at the shelves trying to come up with some of the interest of these things, and I'm like, there's so much that has been adapted already. But I would love to see an Eyes of the Dragon adaptation. Question number 7: one of his films that could use a do-over. Another book that is going to be up for a reread sometime in the near future got made into a miniseries on TV years and years ago, and that would be the Tommyknockers. Now, this is regarded as either one of King's worst novels or one of his best, depending on who you talk to. And there's equal parts that I've seen on King message boards and Facebook groups that argue the point. I remember that there is a good story in here. I think it's a little on the bloated side. Here's King circa like 1986 or 7. But and this was also famously mentioned as like the last novel he wrote before he went straight. So a lot of people call this his Coke novel. Yeah, I just want to reread it again and reform my opinion on it. But I know this was made into a TV series, a miniseries. I think it was on ABC. And it was kind of crazy. I would love to see it done by, with modern effects and a serious, stab at telling the story of the Tommyknockers. But in my mind, I think this one could easily use a do-over. And let's see, you see the It poster there with right there with Pennywise. I'm glad it got remade. I know a lot of people still hang on to the 1990 miniseries as their favorite, but every time I look at Tim Curry in the Pennywise makeup, I laugh. I'm sorry. He's just not scary. Whereas the modern version of Pennywise is way, way, way scarier to me. So I'm glad that it got a remake, but I'm sticking with the Tommyknockers. All right, question number 8. A character that you most relate to. This was slightly tougher, but I'm going to... sorry about that. I'm going to go with Ben Mears from Salem's Lot. The problem with Stephen King books is most of his lead characters are writers. The overwhelming majority of them are writers. So every time I read a book of his that has an author as the main lead character, I just think of King. I don't really hardly picture anyone else but him. But this was like the first time that it was done. And there's some depth to Ben Mears that I really enjoyed. He's going back to Salem's Lot because he lived there once as a kid, trying to recapture the past a little bit. And I was able to relate to that a lot because it's kind of the reason why I'm doing this whole Stephen King reading project thing. That was like one of the original reasons. I had been wanting to recapture that feeling of, like nostalgia kind of, but awe also in rereading a lot of these books that left such a strong mark on my memory. And a lot of them have really held up, I have to say. But yeah, Ben is kind of tortured by the past a little bit, and he wants to try to resolve something with it. I'm not tortured by anything in the past, but I found that very relatable. But yeah, it's kind of tough because a lot of his lead male characters are writers to some degree. There's only a very few books where the lead is not a writer. So, but I'm going to go with Ben Mears from Salem's Lot. A character that you love to hate. Okay, let me dig through the pile here. I'm going with Pennywise. Without a doubt, Pennywise. Probably one of the all-time greatest villains that King ever wrote. The things he does in this book are just insane. And if you've read it, and even if you've seen the movies, you know what I'm talking about. I root for Pennywise a little bit with what he does to Patrick Hockstetter. But for the most part, I'm revolted, but yet I'm rooting for him, but yet I want to see him die, but yet he's so good at being a villain, at being bad, and the things he does to the kids and how he plays with them like the way a cat would play with a toy. And this also, along with Salem's Lot, was the impetus for me to start the rereading project. But without a doubt, Pennywise has got to be one of the greatest villains that King ever did, and you love to hate him. You want to see him get beat, but at the same time, you kind of like him, or sometimes you kind of feel sad for him. And like I said, in the case of Patrick Hochstetter, with what he did, you were rooting for him to get him. So it kind of encompasses almost every emotion reading about Pennywise in this book. So that's my answer for that. Let's see. Where to begin with King? This is the last question. Where should a newbie start with the works of Stephen King? I would say if you're looking for horror, you could easily do any of his early novels. Salem's Lot, The Shining. The Dead Zone is a great novel, which is, part horror, part mystery, part supernatural thriller. Or if you wanted to do King, who was more of just doing straight writing with very little horror elements in it, I would say probably something like Different Seasons. Those stories was a real departure, especially when that book was new, because it was King's way of trying to break out of being just labeled a horror writer. But if you really wanted to get into a great story about King that contains it's more of a human story that contains like an element of the supernatural, or not so much horror, but I would say 11/22/63. It's a big book, I know. This is going to be up for a reread for me too. But this is probably King's greatest love story that he's put. I know Lisey's Story is his favorite novel, and that's about, it's kind of a love story too. It's about a marriage. Didn't care for that book as much as this one. Now, this was made into a miniseries on Hulu, which I just got Hulu this past week, so I'm going to be looking that up and I'm going to be watching it. But man, this is the best book that King wrote in the 2010s, easily, for me, easily. It's a time travel story, but time travel is just one tiny part of the story. Once the main character is in the past, it just becomes, there's nothing else that's really supernatural about it. So it's a great human story. It's a romance. It has, I'm not going to spoil it for those who've never read it or watched it before, but it's got a great ending, a great sad ending. And it's one of King's probably most human books, I would say. The characters are the most real. You can really relate to them easily. It doesn't take a lot of time to get into it. And I adore this book. So this is a top 5 book for me, for King. So and yes, I know I think it's over like 600 pages. It's, a bit of a commitment when it comes to time. No, I'm sorry. We're over like 800 pages. It's like 850. If you're a faster reader, you'll be able to handle it. But once you get into this book, it's very difficult to put down. So don't let the length of it put you off. So if you wanted horror, like I said, go for Salem's Lot. Go for The Shining. Go for his early stuff. If you want just straight fiction writing, go for something like Different Seasons. If you want something that kind of encompasses both, go for this. I don't think any newbie would be disappointed with any of those books, or at least I hope they wouldn't. I'm really the last person to ask about how good or bad King is, because I've read everything, and I'm anxiously awaiting his new book, which is coming out next month, a couple of weeks. So yeah, that's it. Those are the 10 questions for my Stephen King tag. I went a little over time. Sorry about that, but Stephen King is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. So I will gladly sit down and talk with anybody about Stephen King anytime. So thanks, Beth, for making up these questions for this tag. Hope you all enjoyed this. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon. Everybody stay warm, stay safe. Peace. And Stephen King rules.